Hi, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and this is the Ben MAG1 mini laptop. And when I say mini laptop, it has an 8.9-inch display. And in case you're wondering what that means in terms of how big it actually is, well, first of all, here it is by my hands. You can see it's much smaller than a typical laptop. And just to give you a more accurate comparison point here, this is a Dell XPS 13 2-in-1 with a 13.4-inch display. So that's sort of the difference we're talking about between a 13.4-inch laptop and an 8.9-inch laptop. Now, of course, it's not the smallest notebook that you're going to find on the market these days. There are a series of even smaller ones, like this Picago, which has a 7-inch screen and takes up even less space, as you can see here. But there are some compromises that come with these 7-inch models, like the fact that there's no room for a full-size touchpad, the keyboard's a little bit small and cramped, and so on. And so I find that these sort of 8.4, 8.9-inch versions are a little bit more reliable for touch typing and other things. So it has one of the better keyboards that I've used on a mini laptop, and overall I'm going to show you that in a moment. It's got a pretty decent layout here that makes typing relatively easy, but it's still a very compact little computer that's not quite small enough, most likely, to fold up and fit in your pocket, but it is smaller than most. It weighs about 1.5 pounds, measures about 0.7 inches thick. It's a really pretty portable little machine that offers pretty decent performance, and as far as these things go, it's not ridiculously expensive. Prices start at around $630 as of November 2019 when I'm shooting this video. So let's talk a little bit about what it is and what it can do. It's a full-fledged Windows laptop, first off the bat. It just is smaller than most. But we do have a full-size USB Type-A port, a USB Type-C port here for charging or data, micro SD card slot, a micro HDMI port, headset jack, and over here we've got a SIM card slot. The version that I'm featuring in this review does not support 4G LTE, but other models do. The $630 is going to get you a version that has an Intel Core M3 8100Y processor, 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. The version I'm reviewing actually has 16 gigs of RAM, and that's not a configuration that is available for purchase, 16 gigs of RAM and 256 of storage, but you can get 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage if you want to pay a little bit extra. I'm going to have some pictures at liliputing.com. If you remove the screws here, you'll see that the memory and the storage is not user upgradable, so you should probably just pay for what it is that you want. It's not a fanless computer. There is ventilation in here. There is a fan. It is audible when you're using it, but overall it's not ridiculously loud either. And it does have a metal body that gets a little bit warm to the touch under regular usage. It can get kind of hot when you're doing things like playing video games. There's a mono speaker, even though it looks like there's speaker grills on both sides. It's only got one. So overall, there are definitely certain compromises, I think, that come with making something this small. But as I mentioned, it's an overall Windows computer that works reasonably well. So unlock with a fingerprint. That happens pretty quickly. You can use all sorts of different applications. That's not the one that I meant to load, though. Pretty much anything that runs on Windows is going to run on the MAG1. It's got a 2560 by 1600 pixel display, which is a little bit too sharp if you went at 100% scaling. I've got it set to 200% right now, which means that I can sort of fit two windows side by side relatively comfortably, or for full screen viewing, for doing things like typing, it works reasonably well. And as you can see here, touch typing is not all that difficult. So I really like the keyboard for the most part. It's got full QWERTY layout, backlit keys. There are some compromises because this, of course, isn't quite as wide as a typical laptop keyboard. So the tab button, instead of being over here, is up here. So that takes a little getting used to. The caps lock key is sort of attached to the side of the A key. Takes a little getting used to. The thing that sort of throws me for a loop most frequently are sort of these punctuation areas down here. We've got the apostrophe and quotation marks and the colon and semicolon next to the space bar instead of up here where you would normally find them. I also find it a little disconcerting to have the backspace above the delete key, but they're large enough and easy enough to see that it's not a huge problem. The keyboard's very similar to the One Mix 3 Yoga that I reviewed a little while back in terms of layout, but the arrangement of the keys, or the color of the keys, I think is much, much better because we have black keys with white illumination. In this lighting, the backlight, whether it's on or off, doesn't make a huge difference, but in the dark, it makes it much easier to see the keys that the light shines through underneath. And on the 1Mix3 Yoga that I had reviewed, there were silver keys with white lights, and under certain lighting conditions, particularly in sort of brighter rooms where the light would be shining, sometimes illuminating the keys would make the lettering harder to see instead of easier. So I really like the layout of this keyboard, other than maybe the punctuation keys, and I'm not quite sure where else I would put them. And I like the color scheme. So overall, I'm pretty happy with the keyboard. In terms of performance, it's not a speed demon. I mean, you're not going to necessarily want to use it for playing bleeding edge games or anything, but it gets most of the activities that you would expect it to done reasonably well. So you can open a web browser, you can go to YouTube, stream some videos, do some multitasking. It's got a dual-core 7-watt processor with support for hyper-threading. So it handles multitasking reasonably well. And just go ahead and skip that. As I mentioned, it's got a mono speaker, which is not necessarily the loudest.
90, which is the latest version of Dell's 2-in-1 premium convertible notebook. And the reason it's a 2-in-1 is because, as you can see here, we've got a display that's touchscreen, we've got a 360-degree hinge. You can
viewing angles are pretty decent. One thing I should point out here is that it is not a convertible tablet. This is as far back as the screen pushes. It doesn't wobble particularly much when you touch it. It's relatively sturdy hinge, but that's as far as it's going to open. It is a touchscreen display, so you can interact by touch, which I think is handy, particularly on little laptops that you might want to occasionally hold in your hands, or just reach up and touch the screen. But unlike some others, it does have a touch pad below the screen, or below the keyboard. So it's a multi-touch touchpad, supports multi-touch gestures, so we can get to the Windows timeline, we can maximize and minimize applications, and we can do 2-finger scrolling, pinching, zooming, and so forth. It's very small, but it's very accurate. I haven't had any real problems using it to get things done. So it's a nice addition that you don't necessarily find on a lot of mini laptops. The GPD P2 Max also had a touchpad, but that's about it for the sub 9-inch notebook space. So it's nice to have another option here. And yeah, I like that feature. It gives you a little bit more precision when you're doing things like, I don't know, let's grab a screenshot here. I have to remember where the print screen is. There it is. Don't want to save it to OneDrive. So now we have a picture of a blank window here, but you can see that now I can sort of go in and have a little bit more precision, or say I just wanted to get this part of it. Things that are just a little bit easier to do with a touchpad than they would be with something like a little optical touch sensor like you get on the Picogo or the GPD Pocket or 1Mix1S Yoga. So for actual work, it's not bad. I actually wrote most of the written version of the review of this little laptop using this little laptop. It also is not all work. You can use it for a little bit of play. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up a game and show you a little bit of that. And while we're waiting for Darksiders to load, I'll show you that it comes with this fairly compact charger. So it looks more like a smartphone charger than anything else. Charges via USB Type-C. Now, because it does have USB-C, you can also connect it to an external display, to a USB hub, all sorts of other accessories if you wanted to. In terms of battery life, that's sort of one area where I think a lot of these little computers have not necessarily excelled. This one's maybe a little bit better than most. When streaming HD video, I was able to get around 5.5 hours of battery life with the screen brightness set at 50%. I should note that for screen brightness at 50%, this is always hard. Oops. Sorry, that was loud. Screen brightness at 50% is pretty bright on this laptop. My camera's going to auto adjust here, but it gets pretty bright, and at 100%, I think it's almost too bright in some situations. So right now we actually have it at its dimmest setting, and it's working reasonably well. Let me try and bring the volume down a little bit here. So we can keep the volume on, but lower. And I'll show you a little bit of gameplay. It takes a while for this game to load. Again, it supports touchscreen. It does not have a camera. That's something that some others do have that this version does not have. It's not something I miss too much in a mini laptop because I could always just bring out my phone if I wanted to make a Skype video call or record a video or something. But if you wanted something that you could use for video conferencing, this is not necessarily going to be the machine. Again, not a huge problem for me because when you put webcams on these little computers, they're often in awkward positions or they're low quality. All right, so we've got Darksiders up here. You can see that it plays reasonably well. It's a little bit tricky maybe to navigate when the buttons are sort of smaller here. Oop, and my battery's running low. But overall, I mean, in terms of frame rates and visibility and everything, I think it looks pretty good. So as for battery, I was mentioning, I get around, where am I? 5.5 hours of battery life for streaming HD video, maybe 4.5, 5 hours or so of actual general purpose work. And if you dim the screen and maybe even turn off Wi-Fi or did other things, you might be able to get a little bit more time than that. Since the battery is dying, I'm just going to go ahead and quit out of here, though, because playing games, you're definitely not going to get 5 hours. But you can see that with the Intel UHD graphics, integrated graphics, some older games actually work reasonably well. I did try some other games. Mutant Year Zero, for instance, seems a little bit sluggish, so you're going to want to sort of keep in mind that it's not meant for gaming. It can play some games, but you might need to adjust your graphics settings or do other things if you wanted to use it for those purposes. I think we might have just run out of battery power here. But overall, it's a nice little machine. It's one of the better mini laptops I've used, and it's one of the more affordable ones. Now, with starting prices of over $600, you could certainly buy a more powerful laptop for the same price, but it's probably not going to be quite as portable as this mini laptop. So I think if you're willing to put up with sort of some of the compromises that you have, the fact that it's not quite a full-size keyboard, some of the keys are in awkward positions, it doesn't have a webcam, doesn't have a ton of ports, but the ones it does have are reasonably decent. And if you opted for certain models, you might even be able to get 4G LTE. I'm not entirely sure what the regions are that it works in, but you can find out more details about that online. Overall, I think the MAG1 is one of my favorite little mini laptops that I've tested. Now, if you are looking for something that's literally small enough to slide into a pocket, you might be better off with something with a 7-inch screen like the 1MIX 1S Yoga or 2S Yoga or the GPD Pocket or the Picago, because it is substantially smaller. But compared to something like a 13-inch laptop, this is pretty tiny, and it's a rather interesting value proposition, I think. So that's a quick look at the MAG1 from Magic Ben, available from Geek Buying, which loaned me this demo unit for $630 and up. And depending on when you're watching this video, you may even be able to get a coupon, save a couple dollars extra. You can head over to liliputing.com for more details about that as well. This is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and a video overview/review of the MAG1 8.9-inch mini laptop that weighs just 1.5 pounds, has an Intel Amber Lake processor, 2560 by 1600 pixel display, and at least 8 gigs of RAM, 256 gigabytes of storage.